everyone. I have Dr. Chapman with me today. Dr. Chapman, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Ipek. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. So I'll start with a brief introduction. Everybody knows you and loves you so much already. But for those who don't know, Dr. Gary Chapman is an author, speaker, pastor, and counselor. He has a passion for people and for helping them for forming lasting relationships. Dr. Chapman is a well-known marriage counselor and director of marriage seminars. The 5 Love Languages is one of Dr. Chapman's most popular titles, topping various bestseller charts for years, selling over 13 million copies, and has been on the New York Times bestsellers list continuously since 2007. So, Dr. Chapman, my first question for you is, how do you define real love, and why is love so important?
Well, I think love is a very confusing word because we use the word love in many different ways. You know, we say, for example, oh, I love the mountains. You know, I love the beach. I love my car. I love my dog. And then we say to a special someone, I love you. What is that supposed to mean? So I think we have to define what kind of love we're talking about. I think the in-love experience, which we commonly call falling in love, is an emotional thing. You are attracted to that person. There's something emotionally that just kind of draws you to them. You enjoy being with them. When you're away, you're thinking about them. You want to be together again. That's one kind of love. But that doesn't last forever. That has an average lifespan of 2 years, and we come down off that emotional euphoric high. But the kind of love that really builds relationships over the long haul is love as an attitude. Mm-hmm. And it's a fixed way of thinking. And it's the attitude of, I want to enrich your life. I want to help you do whatever you feel like you want to accomplish. I want to be a part of it. I want to help you do that. It's an attitude that we have. And it stimulates emotions in the other person, but it doesn't necessarily begin with an emotion. It begins with that attitude. And then it finds appropriate ways to express that attitude of love.
Okay, thank you so much. And in your book, you talk about children whose love tank is empty, and they may misbehave because of it and look for love in all the wrong places. Is there an emotional love tank inside the hurting couples which is empty? And what do you mean by emotional love tank overall?
Well, I use the love tank metaphor. You know, in a gasoline car, if the love tank is full, if the gas tank is full, you can drive a long ways. But if it's almost empty, you're not going very far. So I picture inside of us, there's an emotional love tank. And if the love tank is full in a marriage relationship, if you genuinely feel loved by your spouse, life is beautiful. But if the love tank is empty and you feel like they don't love me, they wish they weren't married to me, life begins to look pretty dark. And just as some of the misbehavior of children grows out of an empty love tank, you know, they're trying to get attention, much of the misbehavior of adults grows out of an empty love tank. So critical remarks, you know, putting the other person down, complaining to them, often that grows out of an empty love tank. And then sometimes, of course, it gets worse than that. They actually go looking for love somewhere else as an adult. And that's tragic. And that doesn't have to happen if we learn how to keep the love tank full in the marriage.
As you said, it's very important. And now that I look back, if the emotional love tank is empty, it kind of reflects on all the different areas of one's life. Maybe it affects your productivity, it affects your overall mood. It's very important.
Yeah, it does. It affects all of life. You know, all of us will have conflicts because we're human and we don't think the same way. We don't have the same feelings. So everybody has conflicts. But conflicts are much easier to solve if both of you feel loved. Mm-hmm. You know that you genuinely care for the well-being of each other. Much easier to process conflicts. Much easier to process stresses that come in life, such as the pandemic that we're in. You know, it's much easier to handle all those stresses if we feel love. So yeah, love, this kind of love is extremely important in a marriage, and in a parent-child relationship or any close friendship.
Absolutely, absolutely. So moving on with the love languages, it would be nice to hear from you. What are the 5 languages that you talk about in your book, and how do we end up developing those different languages?
Yeah, I discovered those in my counseling. Couples would sit in my office, and one of them would say, I just feel like he doesn't love me, or she doesn't love me. And the other would say, I don't understand that. I do this and this and this and this. Why would you not feel loved? And I knew that they were sincere, but they were missing the other person. In their mind, they were loving them, but it wasn't connecting with the other person. And I knew there had to be a pattern to what I was hearing because I heard it over and over again. And so eventually I sat down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling people and asked myself the question, when someone said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. And I later called them the 5 love languages. And I started using that in my counseling. If you want her to feel love, you've got to learn how to express love in her love language. If you want him to feel love, you've got to learn to express his love language. And so I would help couples discover their love language, challenge them to go home and try it. Sometimes they would come back in 3 weeks and say, Gary, this is changing everything. The whole climate's different now. And then I used it in small groups of couples, and the same thing would happen. So probably 5 years later, I thought, you know, if I could put this concept in a book, write it in the language that people could understand, maybe I could help a lot of couples I would never have time to see in my office. Of course, little did I know the book would sell 13 million copies and be translated and published in over 50 languages around the world, most importantly in Turkish, okay?
It's amazing. And those who haven't read the book before, there are lots of real-life case examples that Dr. Chapman wrote about, and it's very interesting to see how those play out in practice. So I highly recommend everyone to read it. It's amazing, and I'm so glad you decided to write those because you're helping couples all over the world right now.
Yeah, it's been very, 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 very encouraging. So just briefly, the 5 love languages are words of affirmation, using words to affirm the other person. You look nice in that outfit. I really appreciate what you did. You know, one of the things I like about you, it's just using words to affirm the other person. You can focus on the way they look, something they've done for you, some personality trait. And, you know, one of the things I like about you is that you're just always positive. I love that. Yeah, I have negative people at work, but you're always positive. I love that about you. So just giving words. Words can bring death or bring life. We can kill people or give them life by words. So another love language is acts of service, doing something for the person that you know they would like for you to do. In a marriage, that would be such things as cooking meals, washing dishes, you know, mowing grass, washing the car, changing the baby's diaper. Woo, that's a big act of service. Just doing anything for the person that you know they would like for you to do. And with children, because this applies with children as well, we have to speak this language when they're born because they can't do anything. We have to do all of it for them. We put the food in, we take the food out, okay? We do it all. So acts of service, and then gifts. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. And the gift doesn't have to be expensive. We've always said it's the thought that counts. But I remind you, it's not the thought left in your head that counts. It's the gift that came out of the thought in your head, okay? So you can just pick up a flower in the backyard. That's what children do, and they give it to their mother. Well, the husband can do that. So gifts, and then quality time, giving the other person your undivided attention. And I do not mean for a husband and wife to sit down and watch television. Someone else has your attention. TV is off, computer's down, we're not answering our phone, we're looking at each other, we're asking questions, What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What could I do to help? How can I make your life easier? We're just having a meaningful conversation, and they have our full attention, quality time. And then physical touch. We've long known the emotional power of physical touch. That's why we pick up babies and hold them and kiss them and cuddle them. Long before the baby understands the meaning of the word love, the baby feels love, a physical touch. So in a marriage, this would be such things as holding hands, kissing, embracing, the whole sexual part of the marriage, arm around the shoulder, driving down the road, you put your hand on their leg, just, affirming touches. And the simple concept is that out of those 5, each of us has what I call a primary love language. One of them will speak more deeply than the others. Mm-hmm. And if you don't speak their primary language, they will not feel loved, even though you're speaking some of the other languages. So it's just a simple concept, but if you get it, it will enhance the marriage relationship, and it will help you effectively meet that need for love in the part of your children.
Absolutely. I agree with that, both in my professional life and in my personal life too. I've seen how powerful it is once you have that realization. It saves the relationship, basically.
I have many people say to me when I do marriage seminars, and I have many people come up and say, Gary, that book saved our marriage. Yes. I mean, we were talking divorce, and somebody gave us the book. We read it, and the lights came on. And we realized how we'd been missing each other. Mm-hmm. And we took the quiz. We discovered our love language. It literally saved our marriage. That's very encouraging to a counselor, as you well know.
Yes, it is. And speaking of the quiz, it's on your website, 5languages.com. I would recommend everybody to go on there and to answer those questions with your partner, too. Send it to the partner.
Yes. And if they happen to be single adults, there's a quiz for single adults. Okay. The number 5lovelanguages.com.
Exactly. So I have a few more questions about each of those 5 languages that we just talked about. So the first one is about between, and especially since COVID, people spending a lot of time together. I'm hearing a lot of complaints about people nagging at each other. So and of course, the way somebody expresses a desire in a relationship is important but sometimes if you come across as demanding, it might drive your spouse away. So how can someone move from nagging to motivating?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you're exactly right. There are a lot of couples that they had a stressful marriage before the pandemic, and now it's gotten worse. Mm-hmm. And they criticize each other and say condemning things to each other. Here's one thing I suggest. Why don't the two of you call a truce on throwing verbal bombs at each other? Just say, for 3 weeks, let's see if we can refrain from giving negative words to the other person. Just call a truce. And then, after we've been successful for a couple of weeks, what if we try once a week to give each other an affirming word, a positive word, something we like about the other person? So we went for 3 weeks without criticizing each other. Now we're going to add in saying something positive to them. And you'll begin to see the climate change. Because when you throw what I call verbal bombs, they explode in the heart and mind of the other person. And you're really killing the relationship when we throw out criticisms and we speak harshly and in anger to each other. We're killing our relationship. We don't have to do that. We can call a truce and just stop doing that, and then start replacing it with positive words. And that's the way we begin to change the relationship. And the emotions begin to change between us when we do that.
That's a great exercise and a great experiment too. So I would also like to ask, how is technology affecting the way couples are spending time with each other, especially lately?
Well, I think obviously it depends on the individual and the individual couple. Mm-hmm. But I do think that most of us are far too tied to our technology. Maybe we're having a conversation with our spouse, and we get the little ding that says there's a message, there's an email, and we grab our phone and we plug in and we start looking, and and we have just communicated to our spouse or to the other person, somebody out there is more important than you are. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's unintentional, but that's what we're communicating. If you're talking to your child and having a conversation with your child, and you're looking at their eyes and having a conversation, and the phone rings, and you answer the phone, you've just communicated to that child, somebody out here is more important than you. I know we don't intend to do that, but we're doing that. And so I think we have to be very sensitive to that. When we are engaged with a spouse or with a friend or with a child, we need to give them our full attention. Now, I understand if you're a medical doctor and you're on call, and there may be an emergency, then you say to the child, honey, this may be an emergency, so I have to take the call, but stay there because I want to talk to you in just a minute. You know, so I think we have to let now technology can be good also, because, you know, if I'm out of town, I can not only talk to my wife, I can see her on the phone, and we can talk and have a good conversation. So there's a lot of good things about technology. In fact, what we're doing right now is a good thing about technology, because we're sitting here talking. You're in California, I'm in North Carolina, and we're talking to people in other countries. That's wonderful.
Exactly. And maybe this interview can be something that couples can sit down and watch together. Thank you, technology again.
Absolutely.
So cultures like Turkish culture, for example, we have very stereotypical role distribution. So certain things are expected from the mom, let's say the chores of the house and childcare and things like that. So what role do stereotypes play in miscommunication about the acts of service? And where is the line between doing the chores and responsibilities versus acts of service as a symbol of love?
Yeah, I think there are cultural differences, to be sure. In fact, this is one of the things that really surprised me, is that this book has been translated and published in over 50 languages around the world. Because my academic background, before I studied counseling, was cultural anthropology. Mm-hmm. I did an undergrad and a master's in cultural anthropology, the study of cultures. And I knew there was cultural differences. So I said to my publisher, the first publisher that came and wanted to publish it was Spanish. And I said to my publisher, I don't know, does this work in Spanish culture? Mm. And they said, well, they've read the book and they want to publish it. I said, okay. Well, they've sold 5 million copies in Spanish. You know? So this really has surprised me, that this concept has helped people in other cultures. But you're right, there are cultural differences, and certainly stereotypical roles of a wife does this, a husband does this, all that comes into play. But here's the issue. If we have an attitude of love, we will say periodically to our spouse, is there anything I could do that would make your life easier? Mm. Is there anything I could do that would be helpful to you? And they give us an idea, and now we have an opportunity to speak this language in a very meaningful way to them. And yes, sometimes that may go against the stereotypical role. You know, maybe husbands don't wash dishes in a certain culture. But a wife says, honey, if you could just wash the dishes tonight, that would be wonderful. Mm-hmm. Well, sure, you do it. You know, you don't allow the stereotype to keep you from loving your spouse. And so we learn in our individual relationship what would be helpful to the other person.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and those questions are very helpful. Is there anything that I can do to make your life easier? I wanted to repeat that because it makes such a difference in the vibe and the energy of the dynamic. So thank you so much for saying those. So, Dr. Chapman, sometimes couples who have been together for a long time, they start describing each other as roommates. So they talk about doing the same things every day, just living under the same roof, but not even engaging with each other. And life just goes by without maybe any meaningful interaction with them. Sometimes they talk about not even sleeping together. Maybe one of them is sleeping on the couch or separate bedrooms. How can couples come out of this dynamic?
Well, I think a couple of things. One of the things I suggest to couples is, let's have a daily sit down and listen time. You know, sometimes we say, let's sit down and talk, which means I want to tell you something. But let's have a sit down and listen time. in which I say to you, what's been going on in your mind today? What have you been thinking today? What have you been feeling today? See, sometimes in a pandemic, people say, well, we're together all day long. We know what each other's doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you don't know what they're thinking, and you don't know what they're feeling. So why don't you have a sit down and listen time and say, honey, tell me, what have you been thinking today? What have you been feeling? Mm-hmm. Anything I could do for you? And they're asking you the same thing. This gets you connected and keeps you connected with each other. Just that it may just be 15 minutes, but you're sitting down and being connected to each other. I think another thing for some couples who are already estranged from each other, it's going to have to start with an apology for failures of the past, because they have built an emotional wall between the two of them with all the things that have happened, and they've never dealt with those. And the only way you tear down a wall is for us to acknowledge our failures and reach out and ask forgiveness. Now, I know that most of the time in a stressed marriage, we think the other person is the main problem. You know, she thinks he's the problem. He thinks she's the problem. Mm-hmm. Okay. The fact is both of you are the problem, because none of us are perfect. So why don't you sit down and think, where have I been failing in my marriage? And write them down. And then go and say to them, you know, honey, I've been thinking about us. And I just feel like in many ways, I have failed you. I have hurt you. And I just want to acknowledge that. And I want to ask if you can find it in your heart to forgive me. You deserve more than this. I need to be a better person, a better husband, a better wife. Wow. I can't guarantee you they'll forgive you, but they're going to walk away and say to themselves, this is different. All I've heard for 5 years is how bad I am. Now they're acknowledging their failures. Chances are they will forgive you, and they may even come back and apologize for some of their failures. Now you're tearing the wall down. And now we can begin to really love each other, learn each other's love language, and we're on the road now to having a really intimate marriage.
It definitely makes a difference when both partners take responsibility instead of putting it on the other one and then causing the other partner to get defensive, and then the argument escalates. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, for example, when a spouse in a relationship, when a partner in a relationship says, I don't love her anymore, or I don't love him anymore, I don't have any feelings, but they still stay in the relationship because they don't want to hurt the other person, for example, what should they do to move forward? What should, or when does someone know they should give up on the relationship?
Well, you know, often couples will say that. They'll say to their spouse, sometimes to the spouse, I just don't love you anymore. Mm-hmm. And many times that means I'm already emotionally involved with somebody else. So I don't love you. I'm having love feelings over here somewhere else. Mm-hmm. If we think that love is a feeling, that's the way we'll talk. But I think love essentially begins with an attitude, a way of thinking. And the attitude is, I am in this marriage to enrich your life. I want to help you reach your goals in life. I want to do whatever I can to help you. It's an attitude. Then we can love them in our actions by speaking the words to them and their love language. Even if we don't have feelings, we're choosing to love. Mm-hmm. And love stimulates love. Because when you start speaking their love language, something happens inside of them. They're drawn to you. They begin to have feelings for you. And then they're likely to begin to speak your love language. And you begin to have feelings again. So feelings can be reborn. But it starts with the choice of an attitude of love, and then finding the best ways to express that love to the other person. And the relationship can be reborn, and we have those warm emotions again, and we feel love. And that, of course, is what every counselor hopes will happen to the couples that they're counseling with.
And when you explain infidelity, and going back to the emotional love tank that we talked about, and how sometimes an empty one may cause people to look for love elsewhere, how do you explain infidelity? And does that mean the love is over?
Well, there's no question about it that one of the most painful things that can happen in a marriage is infidelity, because it's betrayal of a commitment that you made to each other, that we're with each other for life. Deeply, deeply painful. Can there be healing on the other side of that? There can be. But it means that the one who was unfaithful has to be honest and has to turn away from the other relationship and cut that off and come back and say, you know, in whatever words they communicate, I have deeply hurt you. What I did was totally wrong. I should not have done that. They pour out their heart to them. They ask for forgiveness, and the spouse has a choice to forgive them. If they choose to forgive them, then the relationship can go forward. But forgiveness is a choice, and they may choose not to forgive you, and the relationship will not go forward. But always the healthy thing is to choose to forgive them. And forgiveness doesn't remove the memory. You'll remember what happened. And it doesn't remove the pain, because when you remember what they did, the pain will come back. And what you say then is, you know, I'm feeling this, I'm remembering this, but I'm not going to allow these emotions to control my behavior. I'm going to love them in their love language. And eventually, if you do that, the memory will come back less often, and the pain will come back less often. And forgiveness does not rebuild trust. Trust has to be rebuilt over the coming months when they are trustworthy. And so I say to the person who is unfaithful, and you're coming back and trying to rebuild your marriage, if you want her or him to trust you again, you take this attitude. Honey, my computer is yours anytime you want to look at it. My phone is yours anytime you want to look at it. If I tell you that I'm going over to George's house to help him work on his car, it's fine with me if you want to come over and see if I'm there. I'm through with deceit. I've hurt you enough. I don't want to hurt you anymore. You take that approach, and your spouse will come to trust you again a few months down the road. So trust can be reborn. Forgiveness opens the door to the possibility that trust can be reborn.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Chapman. As we're coming to the end of our time today, I'm curious if you would like to share a few words, especially for the Turkish people who are watching us right now.
Well, let me just say that I was in Turkey several years ago and spoke in 4 of your major cities, and certainly enjoyed being there. I was welcomed with open arms, and every night in the hotels we had a huge crowd that was there. And so let me just say that I hope that this interview will help you in your marriage, help you in your parenting of children, help you in friendships. If we can create loving relationships in our families, we're doing a powerful thing not only for each other and for our children, but we're serving the community much better. When there's healthy marriages and healthy families, children grow up to be healthy adults. And that's what we want. So I hope that this will help increase your intimacy in your marriage and give you a deep, deep sense of love for each other. Remember, love starts out with a choice. I choose to reach out and do what I can to help you.
Thank you so much again. Everything you said was wonderful. And again, I will be adding all the links to this video so you can go on the website for the quiz and also purchase the book if you haven't already done so. Dr. Chapman, thank you so much again for your time. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and it was such a big pleasure for me to talk with you today.
Well, thank you, Ipek. I enjoyed speaking with you, and I appreciate what you're doing on this program, as well as what you're doing in counseling other people. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye.
Goodbye.